Welcome, everyone, to the Imperfect Cheerleader podcast. My name is Jasmine Neely. I am your host, and today we have Amber Tacy. Amber Tacy says she doesn't have any ties to the professional cheerleading world other than a handful of auditions for the Brooklynettes and Jets teams. But she did work as a professional dancer in the commercial space on TV shows like The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel and films like How to Be Single and advertisements, including Anastasia Cosmetics and Ruby Tuesdays. She has technical training in ballet, modern, jazz from Manhattan College, where she got degrees in dance science, which is exercise science for dancers, and psychology. She found that she was a great performer, but no matter how much she worked on her technique and no matter how many classes and styles she took, she just couldn't keep up with the other dancers in NYC. When she got a part-time job working at a fitness studio in New York City, she saw the science of training come to life. She learned about lifting, recovery, and nutrition, and after a few months, it had certifications in all of those areas. More importantly, she applied her dance science book knowledge with physical skills in the gym and finally started seeing improvements in her dancing, her career, and her confidence. In 2020, like many dancers, me included, her dance career took a pause, so she quickly shifted her focus to supporting dancers in her community, and thus Dancers Who Lift was born. It's an online fitness and wellness community for professional recreational performers who want to feel hotter, stronger, and book their dream jobs. Her programs have served over 2,500 performers. She's personally coached 300 plus performers, and her team is still actively coaching dancers globally. It's her personal mission to get a barbell in the hands of every artist so they can take up more space and shine their brightest. I think this is an amazing concept, Amber, and I'm all here for it. I am so glad there's someone in this space who is talking about this. So welcome to the podcast, Amber.
Hi, thanks so much, Jasmine. Thank you.
So I want to just jump right in. And that first statement that I said, and you even told me that you don't have direct ties to the cheerleading world, but you mentioned two big teams that you auditioned for, the Brooklyn Nets and the Jets team. So I want to know, and I'm pretty sure listeners want to know, what drew you to those teams? And I want you to tell us about your experience dancing with those teams
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
auditioning.
Absolutely. So, one thing that was really great about being in New York in my early 20s um, was just there were so many opportunities, and I was just saying yes to every open call, every opportunity, every gig, every audition. So, it almost became an annual rite of passage with me and my friends where the Jets audition would come and we would do the boot camps together and we would go to the auditions, and the Brooklynettes audition would come around in the summer and we would spend a day waiting for the doors to open, sitting on the street, and then they'd open and it'd be 300 girls there. You'd learn the across the floor, you'd learn the combos. And it was just an era of my life when I was saying yes to every opportunity and making my way through every audition. And ultimately, with those teams, I wasn't what they were looking for at that time. This was also, I'm going to date myself. This was also nearly 10 years ago. So, times are different. The look was different. Um, and yeah, the opportunities that were right for me at that time in my life came my way and the others didn't. But it seemed like such a fun atmosphere, and I'm sure you can relate to be surrounded by strong, vibrant women every day. And even just the auditions at that time had that environment and had that vibe to them.
Yeah, and you mentioned that it's an environment with like strong women, right? I want you to talk about what do you think they were looking for back then? And I guess how do you think it's different now? I don't know if you still follow it, but what do you think was different in terms of like what you think they were looking for and how it's changed?
Yeah. So again, I will, like I said, this has been about 10 years ago. But I do recall, like you said in my bio, there was a period where I was really working to keep up in New York and keep up with the dance scene. And then there was a period where I figured it out and I made the shifts. And that was really apparent in these auditions where getting cut from round one across the floor to making it to, the final calls for Brooklynettes at least. So I will say at that time, and again, it is likely different now, there was definitely a specific physical look that both teams were looking for in that time and at that point. Um, the Jets in particular seem to want taller, longer girls. I myself am very petite. I'm a compact brunette. I'm only 5 feet tall. So that was very different. And I remember the Brooklynettes that made it each year that I auditioned were very athletic. And still, I mean, still now, I think athleticism, the priority over aesthetics, so to speak, has shifted to less so petite, small, slender to more athletic, powerful looking performers. And when you look at also the progression of the movements that these performers are doing, I think like for the Brooklynettes, at least I know like being able to do a kip up and a head spring and all of these really exciting moves are now requirements to make the team. Like if you
Wow.
don't have at least one tumbling pass, like you're probably not making it past the second round at this point. It wasn't like that 10 years ago, but seeing that shift and seeing how the dancers who are making it to the final cuts and making it to the team now, their bodies for, they reflect that their look, their appearance, that they reflect how athletic and how demanding the types of dance is now.
Yeah, I think that's across the board
Yeah.
too for most teams, which is a better way to like look at things instead of just being slim and slender to being fit and actually encouraging dancers to be fit,
Yeah.
which I know you are big on. So I want to go back to the very beginning when you were growing up. How did you become interested in dance, and did you always want to be a performer? I know you studied it in college, so I assume like you at some point in your childhood had some type of influence. So tell us about that.
Yeah, yeah. I grew up dancing. It started with, I was 3 years old doing mommy and me ballet classes on the weekends. I was the kid who couldn't sit still. Um, and so my parents were like, all right, we'll get this kid moving, try to, dance some energy out of her. I started competing when I was 5 years old, in the East Coast competition circuit. That was also when I started meeting my first professional dancers, going to competitions and conventions on the weekends, from the time that I was 5 years old all the way up until I was like 18. But at 5, I met my first professional dancer, and I was like, oh, like some kids want to be a teacher or an astronaut. And at 5 years old, I was like, oh, I'm gonna be a dancer.
Mhm.
And so I was really locked in from that point forward. And luckily, I had really, really supportive parents and a really supportive community who they didn't reduce and diminish my passion for dance. They weren't just like, oh, it's just like a cute little hobby that she does, or this is just her thing. Like when, because I think when a 5-year-old says, like, oh, I want to be, I want to drive the dump truck, you're like, that's cute.
Mhm.
But, my parents really took it seriously. And every year, asked how invested I was, and was I willing to sacrifice, not doing this thing or that thing, and they made the trade-off very apparent for me and laid it out very clearly for me that okay, well, if you're going to pursue dance this season or this year, you're going to you're going to be competing this weekend, so you won't be able to go to this birthday party. And so I had um a very grounded relationship with how much I wanted to dance. And every year I chose how much I wanted to invest in my dancing, all the way up until I was 18 and I was invited to tour with a competition convention circuit. That was also the year that I moved to New York and started attending Marymount. And I really felt like I went from being a big fish in a little pond and like, oh, I got this, I'm touring with this competition and, my home studio, and I have all these like awards and things from the competition circuit that I've been in, to stepping into the New York dance scene and really just being immediately humbled by the talents, and just the peer interactions at that time. And so I actually graduated college at 20. So I did my degrees in 2 years, which at the time I was like, this is great because I'll be out in the professional dance scene, the New York scene, faster than everyone else, and I'll have a
Mhm.
leg up. And I really thought I would graduate and walk across the stage and get my diploma, and someone would hand me my diploma in my right hand and like a contract in my left hand. Just completely delusional. But instead, I spent the first 6 months after graduation contemplating, like, oh my gosh, should I stay in New York? I did, but should I stay in New York? Should I go back? What am I doing? All my friends are either going back to school or they did get contracts. I remember a handful of individuals I graduated with, just they graduated on Monday and they were working on a cruise ship or had joined a dance company, a ballet company by that Friday.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my gosh, I've really messed up here. But that's when, the flow really began, and that New York hustle. And like I said before, like just the delusional opportunist who was just like, okay, well, how do I fill my days? How many auditions can I fit into a day? And it was such a fun time in my career to wake up at 4:30 in the morning and go downtown, and you're sitting outside of Pearl Studios, literally on the concrete, waiting for the doors to open so that you can be first on this list and first on that list, and working your way through open calls, and then trying to fit in dance classes in between, and just running across town to babysit for a few hours to make a little bit of money. And yeah, it was just such a fun time in my career. And eventually, hundreds and hundreds of auditions later, the doors started opening. So maybe it wasn't the Brooklynettes one summer, but it was a different opportunity. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I fell into, like you were saying at the beginning, working in TV, working in film, working in a couple off-Broadway projects. I was able to work on Royal Caribbean for a season. So yeah, I lost the plot, but that's a little bit of
No,
background.
that's a lot. I mean, you said hundreds of auditions. That's a lot of auditioning.
Hundreds per
Wow.
season, like per season, like you're
Yeah.
auditioning, seasonally. There's really the fall season and the spring season and some winter and summer stuff in between that you're hoping you don't have to find. Um, but yeah, and I still have it. I have a notebook of every audition that I attended, what the audition was, who it was
Wow.
for, who was casting, who choreographed, what I wore, and then like bits about the combination, um, and
What's
what
that
they were looking
for?
for, who they kept, who they let go. And I found that that was really, in the long run, that was like a piece of advice that a mentor gave me,
Mhm.
right when I came onto the New York scene. But that ended up just being, it was my audition Bible. And it's still fun to look back and be like, oh my gosh, every time I wore this blue top, I made it to, the final round. What does that mean?
Yeah. Oh wow. I'm pretty sure there's like maybe that's kind of fun to know when you note those things and you're like, wow,
Yeah.
like look how far I've come, really.
Yeah.
And you can always go back and see like the hard work that you put in. That's amazing.
Mhm.
And you also mentioned sacrifice, which I know is a big thing when it comes to auditions. How many years did you stand in those long lines? I'm just curious. And how many years did you go from audition to audition, like until you were like, okay, maybe I should try something different or go a different route? Or when you did make those auditions and you had those jobs, was that more fuel to keep doing that or go somewhere different, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So the way that I looked at it and still look at it is auditioning is the job, and performing is the reward. And
Mm,
even when you're booked, even when you have a gig, I would be rehearsing for one gig in the evenings or one job in the evenings and have, you know, an audition lined up that morning, because I wanted to make sure there was something else coming down the pipeline.
Mhm.
So yeah, in that regard, there was never like, oh, well, this isn't working out for me.
Mhm.
Because the work was showing up to the audition and, you know, the job is being rejected.
Yeah,
um,
that's
yeah.
true.
And
It
it
gives you
wasn't.
some skin, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you have to have just such thick skin. And, you know, some days it definitely felt thicker than others. And other days I felt very, very thin skinned and very vulnerable with, especially when it's a job that you really want, or all of your friends get kept for something and you're asked to leave, like processing that and wondering why. And it's because I was the only brunette in the room. Like, okay, you're out of here. Like, you never know.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, but for me, like auditioning really was the job. And um you know, getting to perform, booking a job, getting paid to perform and to dance, that was the reward. And oftentimes, you know, there were stints between rewards. And that's when, you know, I think the dancer's side hustle really comes into play. And that's when I started working at a personal training gym in New York, just a small little gym on the Upper East Side. And that's where I started to put the pieces together between what I was learning in the books conceptually about physics and physiology and the anatomy of dancers, and then looking at different movement patterns and how dancers really move and how we're structured and the positions that we find ourselves in and how we can optimize our strength and our force output, and looking at our different positions as like force generators and fulcrums and all of these just like conceptual things suddenly came to life. Um, and then I was able to, you know, apply that in my own life. And suddenly those auditions, those calls, those or callbacks, they just became more and more frequent, because my body started changing. I was getting stronger, my legs were going higher, I was jumping higher, I was on my leg. Um, and I was just more confident overall. Um, and my friends, my colleagues, my peers that I was auditioning with regularly, they started to notice. Like I vividly remember walking into an audition and I was warming up and I was doing like a bunch of like push-ups, and one girl just looked at me and she was like, "I got to know what you're doing. Like whatever you're doing, it's
Wow.
working. Like I've seen what you're doing. Like like genuinely, please help me." And I was like, "Oh wow, like." You're where I was a year ago. Of course you don't know that. Like I have all this book knowledge. Like you probably don't have a degree in dance science. So that's when I started Dancers Who Lift the blog. And I was just like answering people to ask me questions in the holding rooms about, you know, well, what do I do for this? How do I strengthen my ankles? Why do I have hip pain? What exercise can I do for X, Y, and Z? Nutrition stuff. What do I eat before an audition? What do I eat during a long day on set? That I just had learned and then adapted and applied. And so that's when the blog was born. And from the blog, over time became individuals asking me for coaching advice and individual coaching. And yeah, now Dancers Who Lift, the platform and the community is where it is now, all these years later.
Yeah, and it's a great platform. And I want you to go off on that just a little bit on the data science, because it makes so much sense in terms of physicality and athleticism. And a lot of people may think dancers are not athletes. And this gives this backs that up in that argument of why dancers are in fact athletes. So when you were studying dance and dance science, what, I guess looking back now, what do you think needed to be implemented in, or what do you think needs to be implemented now in dance programs, whether it's in school or just in training, if you're training on the side, to set dancers up to be stronger and more athletic?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think the concept of dance science, again, in the past 10 years, it's a lot more prevalent now. It's something that when you say it, it doesn't need as much explaining. The same way that we can talk about exercise science or, sports medicine, and people understand the concept. So it's come a long way in the last 5 to 10 years, just conceptually understanding that there are, whether you want to call a dancer an athlete or not, that just comes down to semantics. There are athletic demands on dancers and performers that other basketball players or tennis players, they don't have those same demands. They're not doing their sport barefoot. They're not doing the exact same movements, 3 times a day, for 90 minutes. You're looking at like perhaps a showgirl or a rockette who's doing, what is it, something like 700 kicks a show or something. So, so I think now, luckily, there is just more general awareness for something has to be done to support dance technique training. And I think there's this really beautiful merger of language and application around what we can do for our dancers, both in the studio and out of the studio. So for really anyone under 18, I think just primarily focusing on your technique training, focusing on your form when you're performing and when you are, working on skills. I think for those dancers under 18 who are still training, making sure it comes down to the like the studio and where you're performing. Are you practicing on concrete and hard floors? Are you practicing on sprung floors? Are your shoes good? Are they worn out? What's your recovery like? I think there's a lot more, especially for younger dancers, that comes down to the different modalities and structural concepts of the technique and recovery that's beneficial. After a dancer steps into their professional world and they're maybe not taking, 40 hours of technique classes a week or what have you, they do have more time. I think looking at the individual's needs. You really can't say this is dance strength training, because how a modern dancer needs to train and their needs are very different from an Irish dancer, which is very different from a cheer dancer, which is very different from a ballet dancer, which is very different from a musical theater dancer. And so there's all these things that you have to take into mind. Is the individual standing turned out most of the time? Is the individual doing a lot of floor work? Is the individual doing partnering? So there's a lot that comes into play that, to say this is how dancers should train and this is what every dancer needs for strength training is a bit obtuse and a bit too general. But I think understanding the benefits of some sort of resistance training for every body, especially knowing that we're primarily talking about women, the benefits of strength training for women and resistance training for women expands a lifetime beyond being a performer, because at some point you will hang up your shoes and you will take a step back and be like, okay, who am I? And you still have a body that you have to take care of, and you've put miles and miles on those tires, and making sure that your body is still going to be there to support you long after your dance career, wherever you transition into, is not to be taken lightly. So again, we know the benefits of resistance training when it comes to power, when it comes to being on your leg, when it comes to having a tight core, when it comes to pelvic alignment and spinal stability. We know this, but also looking at things like bone density, understanding that after the age of, I think it's 35. I might butcher that stat, but I think it's after the age of 35, your muscle mass, your muscle density starts to decrease a certain percentage every single year, even if, or rather, unless you are actively working to maintain that muscle mass and maintain that density of mass through adequate nutrition and strength training. So for the dancers who are like, oh, just dancing is enough to keep me in shape and just dancing is good, that's true for a lot of people, and maybe for right now, for this season of life, especially if you're a younger dancer and like you're in your early 20s. But preparing for life after dance or wanting to extend your career so that you're not 25 and like that's the cutoff, and you can dance and perform well into your 30s or your 40s or your 50s or however long you want to keep dancing. I think that really needs to be emphasized and considered in the conversations today. So it's not just about, you know, how shredded can I be, how high can I jump, you know, how fit do I look in my photos, but really how the longevity of what am I doing now for my body to prepare me for tomorrow, next week, 10 years from now.
That's so good. And okay, so for pro cheer dancers and aspiring pro cheer dancers, what where there's a lot of high intensity 1 minute dances where it's like go for 1 minute, it's basically a high intensity workout. And there's a lot of jumping, there's a lot of groundedness and hip. You're standing on your hip, like if you're at a game, you're standing up the entire time, and oftentimes you might might have one toe pointed out, and then you're doing kicks, you're doing leaps, you're doing turns in boots. A lot of time, if you're in NFL, sneakers. Sometimes you're in heels and in the NBA and other types of shoes. What would you say for a pro cheer dancer is one thing that they should focus on, or maybe a couple things, maybe 1 to 3 things they should focus on in training to become the best at their audition that they can be?
Yeah. So obviously if you're going, you know, 0 to 100, the most obvious answer is making sure that you can make it through your routines, make it through that 60-second routine without huffing, puffing, falling on the floor and collapsing because you can't, the cameras are on you.
Mhm.
So I think the obvious thing is if you are not doing any sort of high intensity training prior to, or rather in preparation for your cheer performances, you have to, so that you can pick up the dances, run the dances full out. That being said, I think once you've made the team, you're getting that same high intensity training every single day, every day that you rehearse, every day that you're on the court. So your body will eventually adapt to that. That's our bodies are so smart. So our bodies will eventually adapt and learn how to get through those performances while smiling, while not missing a beat. So at that point, the thing to focus on, step 2, would be slowing down. So how much resistance can you create in the gym and in your cross training? Whether that's moving with excellent form, thinking of squats, deadlifts, push-ups, making sure that you are just stretching and getting the juiciest movement throughout the entire full range of motion. Or using heavier weights, again, to create more tension on the muscles and optimize blood flow and mind muscle connection and muscle recruitment, because strong muscles will react faster. And I think that's maybe a common misconception is people who are involved in, high intensity performing, whether that's, cheer dancers or people on Broadway, they say, oh, okay, I have this really intense number. I have this really intense piece to get through. So I better, do sprints, take high intensity classes, and just train high intensity all the time. But what they really need is stronger muscles. Your intensity is going to be related more to your breathing. Can you get through this without puffing and puffing and, passing out on the sidelines? But how strong are you? Do your muscles have the actual endurance to get through that? And I don't mean endurance as in, running a marathon every day, but I mean, can your muscles lift your body weight plus multiple times and then go and perform and not be fatigued? And that's like the literal strength aspect. So I'd focus on intensity prior to making the team to make sure that once you're there, you're able to keep going and get that oxygen to your brain and how to breathe and regulate your breathing throughout high intensity movements. I would focus on resistance training with probably an emphasis on tempo. So we could do a whole podcast on what it means to incorporate tempo when you're lifting, but it's pretty much the same as when you're dancing, down for a certain amount, up for a certain amount, to really create a lot of tension and recruitment on the muscles. And then your recovery. Like you said, if you're dancing in boots, in heels, if you're an NFL dancer and it's snowing one week and then the next week you're in Florida and it's 80 degrees, like how are you recovering between performances? So are you eating well? Your sleep needs to be optimized. And all of this sounds like maybe basic on top, but you would be so surprised at how many people just kind of overlook this and bypass this and, oh, it's okay. We can go out tonight. We can go, I don't have to perform for another 3 days. We have 3 days off. So, I can go out tonight. No, and we can drink, we can party, we can stay out late, not understanding that you are now in a deficit energetically. And when you, even if you have 2 or 3 days to recover from going out, from partying, from eating less than nutrient-rich foods, which we should do that sometimes. But yeah, your recovery has to be prioritized in order to keep you front and center and performing your best. So those would probably be the 3 things that I would focus on.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what if somebody is listening to this and they're like, oh my gosh, I don't know, I've never strength trained before, and I've never done a high intensity workout. Well, mainly, I've never strength trained before, and they want to start. And maybe they're also afraid of, I don't want to get bulky, which I mean, everybody doesn't know this, but it's a myth that women will, have look like a man basically, unless you take testosterone. But what would you say to them to get started? And yeah, let's just start there. What would you say to them to get started if they're trying to start out strength training?
I love this question. I love having this conversation with my clients who are new to the world of strength training, because suddenly dancers feel like we talk about strength training and suddenly they're just these delicate little butterflies. And I'm like, babe, like, do you see what you do on a regular basis? Like, dancers are already so powerful and so strong. But for whatever reason, the concept of strength training feels very unobtainable and very far off and very intimidating. And whether that's because it has been historically a male-dominated area, or like you think of like the gym and it's grungy and it's whatever, and there is that bulky thing that lives in the back of our minds because of societal pressures and whatever. But I just think it's so funny that, a dancer will do like round off, backhand, spring, back tuck, land in the splits, but be scared to, squat more than 20 pounds.
Yeah.
I'm just like,
That is really funny.
right? Like, and you're using these pink weights and it's like, okay, how much does your dance bag weigh right now that you carry around every day?
Literally.
Like, you're capable of so much. So the first thing that I would say to a dancer who feels very intimidated by strength training is that like you are already so capable, and already so much further ahead than someone, desk job Sally, who hasn't moved or done any sort of athletic things since high school gym class. And the other thing too is that like I think it's really important for dancers to know that like it's not your fault. If strength training feels very foreign, that's because we were never really taught how to do it, but we were often expected how to do it. One of my favorite questions to ask is, were you ever taught how to do a push-up?
Was I? Okay, so I guess yes and no. Like
Yeah.
the studio that I grew up dancing in, whenever we got in trouble, we got push-ups. So we did a lot of push-ups because my class got in trouble a lot. And they always say, keep your butt down, keep your hands out. But it was not like a focus. It was just like do these push-ups and get up and let's keep going. It was it wasn't
Yeah.
really, we didn't spend that much time on it. I'm sure at some point we did go over it, but not to my knowledge. I don't remember
Yeah.
spending much time on it.
So I think that's a really common thing with dancers is I was expected to know how to do this athletic thing, but never formally taught. Whereas we look at
Mhm.
all of how to do a battement. We were taught how to you tendu and then you brush. And, we're taught how to do a battement. We're taught how to do a jump. We were taught how to do all of these other movement modalities, but for whatever reason, when it comes to squats and push-ups and hip hinges, we weren't taught. And there is a technique to it. And so as a dancer, if you're like, I don't know why I can't do this, it's because there's a technique that maybe you haven't been taught. Other than just like getting some, like you just described, like cues, right? Like make sure your butt's down and your hands are here. But is that the same as cueing, the same as really understanding the technique, and where you're supposed to feel it and how to position yourself right for your body?
One,
Um,
sorry, one thing I will say is and I think this goes to your point, I never knew that push-ups were actually a chest move until I was young, until I was older. I thought it was always an arm move, but really it's a chest move. And I always thought that fascinating because I was never taught that in dance class, but we always had to do them. So to your point, yes, we didn't know. And I could probably ask that question to my other teammates growing up, and they probably would say the same thing.
yeah. Yeah. So what would I say to a dancer who's intimidated by strength training and where to start is one, you are already so capable. Two, if you don't feel capable, it's not your fault that you don't know how to do this. But three, there's really four main movements that are the foundation of strength training. They're essentially the pliés and tendus of strength training. And that would be your vertical push, which is pushing things overhead, your vertical pull, which is pulling down like a lat row or a chin up, your hip hinge, which is going to be any sort of deadlifts or bridge, anytime you're bending right at the waist, and then your knee dominant movements, which would be squats, lunges, anything happening at the knees, or I guess there's six, sorry, I said four. And then you have your horizontal pushes and horizontal pulls, like we were just talking about push-ups, chest press, as well as horizontal rowing. So if a dancer can go into the gym a few times a week, 2 days a week, and pick one movement from each of those areas and just commit to 3 sets of 8 to 12 reps, you are on your way. You are well on your way to better posture, stronger movements, and ultimately better longevity as a dancer and as a human on this planet.
Hmm. That's so good. And you can start small, like you said. You
Exactly.
can start with one day a week if you need to. Like you don't have to go to 5 days a week if that's not where you are. So I love that advice. I want to talk about injuries for a little bit. I personally am recovering from an ankle sprain and wondering if there's something I could have done to prevent it and strengthened my ankle and muscles around it. And I know sometimes no matter how strong you are, injuries are unavoidable. But I know always strengthening your muscles can avoid future injuries, right? So you mentioned on social media that you've had a serious injury as well. So can you tell us how strength training can prevent those injuries and how you can accelerates the healing after an injury?
Yeah, absolutely. So my injury was also an ankle injury. It was one of my first gigs that I was doing in New York. It was an outdoor experiential theater moment, just as weird as it can get, to the point where the audience would come to you and they were being driven on these tractors. They were in like a box in the back of the tractor that rolled around stage to stage. And then they would watch you perform and drive away. Um, at one of my shows that I was performing in, my foot ended up under the wheel of the tractor as it rolled away, and I panicked and
Ooh.
tried to twist out. And luckily, it was just an ankle sprain, and I didn't tear
Wow.
my Achilles or anything or break any bones. But sometimes, as you're probably experiencing, like sprains are often like worse than just a
Yeah,
break.
because it lingers on forever, it seems like.
Mhm. That kind of led me into this season of like side quests where I was going to physical therapy regularly. And because I was so set on getting better as quickly as I could, getting back into my auditions, getting back into my classes. So I was just at physical therapy as often as I could be. And to the point where I was like, hey, if I wanted to come here every day, could I have a job? Because I'm not dancing, I'm not auditioning, like I'm not making money right now. And so they looked at my education, and they were like, well, would you be interested in going back to school for physical therapy? And I was like, well, yeah, maybe, but you have to have clinical hours to do that and all these other things. And they were like, well, you can get your clinical hours here. You're here every day anyways. Why don't you come on as, one of our physical therapy assistants? And so I spent a season in New York recovering from my ankle injury and also learning a lot about physical therapy and kind of putting the body back together after an injury. Um, and and so, I think to your point, when we can't we can't say something like this is injury prevention. We simply cannot prevent injuries. Life
Mhm.
happens, fate happens. You can step off the sidewalk and roll your ankle, and nothing could have prevented that. So to say,
Mhm.
strength training is injury prevention, is just simply not true. But what we want ultimately is to be strong enough, and have adequate muscle mass, have adequate mobility, have adequate flexibility, have joint stability, and ligament stretch and pliability. Um, Essentially, be mobile and strong enough and meaty enough as a person that when and or inevitably, if an injury should occur, we are able to, one, reduce the intensity of that injury because, well, it's only a grade, 1 sprain versus like a grade 3 or something, because, my ankles were flexible and I'm strong enough to, roll back. And so one, making sure that it's not going to be as bad as it could be, and two, that we understand how to fuel ourselves, how to regulate our emotions and our nervous system, so that you're not in a constant state of like, oh my gosh, I'm injured, I'm going to lose my job, and you make it so much worse than it needs to be, and you have all this stress in your system that your body can't actually recover, as if you were just to relax and be like, okay, it's going to heal in time. I know that I'm doing the exercises that I'm supposed to do. I know that I'm eating in a way that's going to reduce inflammation and expedite recovery. I know that I have other recovery modalities available to me that I can incorporate to expedite this process as well. Or at the very least, I know that everything happens for a reason and I'm just going to be zen about it for this season. Um, so yes, so there's definitely, a stigma around wanting to make sure that we never get injured, but then if we do get injured, making sure that we're not blaming ourselves for that. I do think that a lot of injuries are interconnected. I was just interviewed with another magazine talking about this same injury that I mentioned before. And looking back, I think there were a lot of things early in my career that I was just not focusing on, like ankle mobility. Like I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I use my feet every day. My feet are strong. My ankles are strong. My calves are strong. And then I have an ankle injury. And suddenly I'm like, where's the muscle? Where's the mobility? Where's the
Mhm.
real strength there? Just because I use it a lot doesn't necessarily mean that it's strong. And I think
Mhm.
that that comes up a lot for dancers when we see things like shoulder injuries, hip injuries, knees and ankles. Your joints are protected by the muscles above and below them. So if you want longevity in your joints, ask yourself what you're doing to regularly strengthen the muscles around them.
Yeah, that's so good. And you can't really avoid injuries at all, right? But you can help to accelerate the healing. And a lot of times people don't want to rest. They want to keep going, me included. But you have to rest too. That's a big part of just the healing process as well. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
So on your platform, Dancers Who Lift, you talk about not only strength training, but you also talk about the mental aspect and also nutrition. But all right, so what would you say to aspiring pro cheer dancers um, about the mental aspect of performing or auditioning? And what would, because it's audition season, we're in the thick of it, and there's a lot of rejection probably going on. There's a lot of maybe self-doubt, self-confidence. So I guess what would be your piece of advice for mentally preparing and getting somebody through auditions?
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said earlier in this call, the job is auditioning, the reward is performing. And not every audition it will work out. So putting yourself out there as often as you can, outside of like when it like really, really matters, right? If the only time you're ever experiencing rejection is in a moment where it feels really big and it's like it's down to you and you're like the final five, like, and that's the only rejection you ever experience, that's going to hit so hard. But if you can set yourself up throughout your day-to-day life to kind of desensitize yourself to being rejected, you will go so far in this industry. Something as simple as asking someone like, hey, can I have an extra scoop of guac on the side of my Chipotle at lunch for free? Like they're probably going to say no, but that no now makes you a little bit stronger. It makes every rejection hurt a little bit less. So that by the time you get to the bigger ones, of course it's going to hurt if you really, really want it and you don't get it. Like, of course. But you can, the same way we strengthen our muscles, we can strengthen our minds in that same way. And you just have to get the reps in. And so if you find that you're taking rejection very harshly, and you're feeling a lot of anxiety around putting yourself out there, being seen, being perceived, ask yourself, am I putting in the reps to strengthen this muscle? Because what is available now was not available when I was auditioning. And that's really like creating a social media platform where you can go out there and put your best choreography out there, show off a routine that you created. Don't steal other people's routines or anything, but but put yourself out there, share an opinion, share an outfit. You can really put yourself out there to strengthen that rejection muscle or that perception muscle, which I think or that vulnerability is really what it is, right? Putting yourself out there, being perceived, being liked, chosen, not chosen, etc. Use these tools to your advantage, whether that's talking to people in person or putting yourself out there on social media. Create the opportunities that you want. And if the opportunities aren't coming to you, I've seen it so much with myself, with my clients, with my friends, my peers who, okay, I didn't book this job, this role, this gig. I'm going to go put on my own show. And they go and they write a one-man show and rent out a theater and perform it and win awards for that. So we live in such an amazing time where if you really want something, if you really want an opportunity and the way that you think you were going to get it isn't working out, there is probably a way for you to create that for yourself. And I know it's a little different with the cheer world, because you really want to make the team, but I think there are things that you can be doing. Like, are you showing up as that version of you, that pro cheer performer version of yourself on your social media, in your everyday life? Are you carrying yourself in that way? Are you doing your hair and makeup in the way that you really become that person who you want to be, who has that opportunity? And if you're not, ask yourself, why not? Because that's a lot of the coaching too that we do at DWL is like, are you acting like the person that you really want to be? And what beliefs do you hold about yourself and what beliefs do you hold about that person? And do they match? Because if you're over here and you have a lot of negative self-talk and, oh, I'm not good enough, and oh, my hair isn't shiny enough, and all of these things are going on in my legs aren't high enough, I fall out of every turn, and you're saying all these things about yourself, but the person who books the job, makes the team, they are smoking hot. They nail every pirouette. They, have lots of friends. They're the life of the party. Well, where's the misalignment? And you have to find a way to make that reality your truth in a really authentic way, not in a way where you feel like you're like faking it or lying to yourself, but what about that is true for you? And can you claim right now, even before you step into that and have that opportunity? Yeah.
Yeah, and if you aren't nailing every single turn, if you nail one turn, that's fine. You are getting there. It's a way to like reframe your thoughts and reframe your brain from the negative to the positive. Because when you think negative thoughts, I always say this, negative things probably will happen. If you think positive thoughts, positive things happen, right? So thank you. really, really great. Also, on the rejection piece, my thing is, and people who listen to this podcast know, when I go and buy something, I always ask for 10% off. Not always, but sometimes I
Mhm.
ask for 10% off because I'm like, okay, maybe I get it and maybe I don't. Sometimes it works. It
Oh, yeah.
actually works sometimes. And I'm like, oh, they gave me 10% off. I wasn't expecting that. And then sometimes it doesn't. And that's what it's expected. But you're, like you said, you're training your brain to take that rejection. So
Yeah.
it's a really
Oh,
good
yeah.
point.
I just asked for something that would cost so much money. It was $25,000, or it was $50,000, and I asked for it for 25. They said no. Well,
Wow. I mean, you shoot your shot. Hey,
that's
50%
what
off.
I'm
Why?
saying. What are they gonna say?
So if you could tell, Dan, I know nutrition is big for you too. You talk about nutrition and it's, I mean, a lot of people don't know like how to eat when it comes to audition season and getting their body ready to audition. But are there any, I'm just curious, if there's any supplements that you think dancers could take for to get that nutrition or to get, just healthier in general. And does that have something to do with the training aspect as well? Does it go hand in hand? And if you have any nutritional advice, please share that as well as a dancer.
Yeah, yeah, this is
That
a
was an
great.
all over the place question, but
No, it was great. Because again, like we were saying before, when it comes to exercise, we're not taught the technique of exercise. There is a technique to nutrition, and similar to techniques on our bodies, the hand positioning and angles of your elbows and holding things in a certain way is very individualized. When it comes to nutrition, it's individualized as well. You need to do things according to your lifestyle, your culture. So whatever is individualized to you. But that being said, there still is kind of I like to look at it as a pyramid almost of things of importance. And so at the bottom of the pyramid, the foundation of the pyramid, it's at the bottom, but it's the most important. This is going to come down to overall caloric intake. Are you eating enough? And I know dancers are like, no, but I want to be really fit for my season. And I hear, words like calorie deficit and cutting and all of those things. Um, are you eating enough for your performance demands? And if you are in too big of a deficit, your performance goes down, you're going to pass out, you're not going to feel good, you're going to be hangry, you're not going to be fun to be around, your smile is not going to be as bright. And that's when we start to see things that are avoidable, like injuries and forgetting choreography when you're in the middle of a show because you didn't eat enough beforehand. So overall caloric intake, making sure that it is enough. The next step then would come down to a very individualized approach. You asked about supplements. The best supplement that you can take is something from the earth. So that's going to be fats, carbs, proteins, and get as much of it from the planet as possible. Not from, a lab or a bottle or a pill or a potion, but real whole nutrient dense foods. So things that are colorful, fruits, vegetables, as well as variations of proteins and whole carbs and healthy fats. And I know that's boring and that's like, well, duh, of course, eat healthy. But it really is so important. And I'm always so shocked at how many dancers are relying on things like protein shakes and power bars. And then they're like, why don't I feel good? And I'm like, babe, when was the last time you had a banana? Like, eat a
Do you go to
vegetable.
the produce section in the grocery store and not the protein
Exactly.
shake or protein bar section?
Exactly. And we do this though, where we start to prioritize convenience, right? What can I throw in my dance bag? Or what do I not have to think about at the end of the day after I've danced all day and I've rehearsed and I've traveled and I don't want to go home and I don't want to do dishes and what's going to be easy. But really, like saving those things for as we move kind of up the pyramid, right, of importance, that's when we can look at things like supplements, like protein bars, protein powders. I do think as an athlete, as someone who is using your muscles, you're recovering often, you're training hard. Hopefully, you're adding in things like resistance training, which will do more damage to your muscles, which then require more intake of carbs and proteins and fats. Um, making sure that you have those extra resources available through those things. So for supplements specifically, I would recommend that every dancer performer have either like a go-to protein bar or protein shake, and a relatively easily digestible carb source. Because what we don't want is to be in the middle of a show, performance, or right before something, and we need a little energy boost, and carbs give us energy. And we eat something that's like really high in fiber, and then suddenly like we feel kind of icky and bloated, or like eating something that's really challenging to digest, like a salad. I know so many performers who are like, oh, I just want something light before a show, I'm going to have a kale salad. Well, kale is one of the most challenging things for our bodies to digest. It's why when you eat it you feel full longer. It's why it helps with our digestion, because it kind of collects everything along the way as it moves its way out.
So much fiber.
Right? But it's not necessarily the most comfortable when it comes to performing, because your body is now working really hard and has all this internal struggle. So actually having something like candy and sugary candy, these foods that we have been taught to label as bad, or, oh, don't eat that, like that's not quote unquote healthy. Well, actually, health is relative. And how are you using it? Are you using it as a tool for your performance? Because having a handful of Skittles and then going and performing gives you like 20 grams of carbs. It's a great boost. We know that it's great for mental performance, because now you feel really happy. You get a little serotonin boost and a little dopamine kick because it's fun and it's candy and it makes you happy. And now you have energy that's easily digestible. It spikes your blood sugar and you're ready to go. We don't only want our energy source to be candy, because then we're going to feel terrible. But being really strategic with how you're incorporating the foods that you're eating and what foods you're choosing to add to your diet, from like an optimization standpoint. In general, I do think that most women should be taking a multivitamin, probably some sort of magnesium supplement, and I said protein powder, magnesium. Yeah, and then if you're not someone, if you're plant-based, you probably want a BCAA supplement and a calcium supplement. But I don't think dancers need a lot of supplementation in general. Ideally, we're getting all of our supplements and our vitamins and our nutrients from the food that we're physically eating and ingesting. And then if we need a little bit extra, for example, maybe you need an iron supplement. If you're someone who's naturally low in iron, that's totally fine. Add that in if you don't like eating meat. So, but you don't want your only source of iron that you're relying on to come from this little pill. You want to eat iron-rich foods first, and then the pill just kind of rounds it out,
Yeah, for sure. Definitely natural is better. I know you got to get out of here, but I want to ask you one more question, and then some really rapid fire questions that I didn't tell you about before. But I want to know about your commercial experience. If anybody knows me, they knew it's a life goal of mine to be in a commercial. I think I've been in one, actually. Yeah, I have been in a commercial. But like I want to be more like that. And this is just selfish. This is a selfish question. But there might be somebody out there that may want to go down this route and maybe be an alternative route to pro cheer and dance. So first of all, what was your favorite commercial to do? I mentioned some in your bio. And yeah, can you tell us about that experience? And it just sounds like fun to me.
Yeah. The great thing about commercial work in general, not necessarily like commercials, but just general commercial work, is the pay. Like commercial dancers are making money.
Mhm.
It's nice. Regardless of the project, to just like have a really nice paycheck and feel like you can like breathe for a little bit after getting to do what you love to do is so rewarding. My favorite experience wasn't for a commercial per se, but commercial project. It was for a Grammy nominated music group called Adventure Club. They're an EDM group, and they wanted dancers for the visuals that would play behind them. And I actually got this job not through an audition, not through my agent at the time, but through just a friend of a friend who knew them and heard them talking and referred me. So
Mm.
point A is like, be nice to everybody because people
Yeah.
will refer you for great gigs. But yeah, I was living in New York and they flew me out from New York to LA for the weekend and got to set full. It was just me. I thought it was going to be me and a bunch of other dancers. It was just me. And they were like, you have full creative freedom, like move however you want to move, and which is unheard of, like to just be like step on set and it's yours. And the director was giving some direction, but it was really just like me vibing on set. And yeah, so that was probably the coolest experience. Later in, day one was me dancing and then recording and like dancing with some props and things. Day two was a little more experimental. There was a moment where they were like pouring a bucket of paint over my head and like watching it like go down my face.
Wow.
So
Interesting.
yeah, they were like, would you be willing to try this? And I was like, that's the other thing too, is like be willing to say yes. How many things can you as a performer say yes to? Can you ride a unicycle? Can you roller skate? Are you willing to have paint poured over your head for an afternoon? Whatever it is, whatever it takes to pay the bills. Um,
Wow.
so that was like a very strange and very surreal experience. And then I got to see them in concert later that year and see me on the visuals behind it, which like if you've been in a commercial, you're like, oh, that's me on TV for 30 seconds. But to be at a concert and see myself on the screen for like an hour and a half was so surreal. It was very, very cool.
Crazy.
Yeah.
That's wow. Is there somewhere like we can watch it?
It's probably on YouTube.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Send me the link and I want to check that out. That's really
Yeah.
cool. I just want to get into a couple like rapid fire, quick answer questions. And then we can wrap it up. Does that sound okay? Okay. So, yeah, just quick, straight to the point answers. And they're like dance related. So, I want you to name three words that every dancer should keep in mind for audition season.
Ooh. Um, Authenticity, um, posture. I think the posture when you enter a room is really important, and resiliency.
Good. Your favorite exercise for strong core.
Ooh, my favorite exercise. It's an RKC plank, and I teach it to all of my clients. Um, and it's kind of hard to describe vocally. I could show you visually. But
Yeah.
it is essentially a contracted isometric hold, and you're like, well, I'm already in a plank. How can I add an extra isometric hold? It's like a bonus isometric hold while you're in a plank position. And it is really, really phenomenal.
Hmm. Okay. Let's try that one. Your the one food every dancer should have in her diet, her or his diet.
Water, please. Drink, stay
Yes.
hydrated.
Yes. Definitely. Your favorite style of dance.
Ooh. I am, I mean, I'm a musical theater babe to my core.
Love it.
The Paducah moment.
Favorite dance that you ever performed
What
or
is,
performance.
oh, okay. I was like, what is that? I was in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. I
Ooh.
got to perform choreography by Nappy Tabs.
Yeah.
That's one year. That was really cool. I was in their opening number. So
That's
that was one of my
awesome.
favorite performances.
Love that. Okay, your favorite or your first dance related memory that comes to mind.
Oh, I had a light up tutu.
Oh,
I remember being like itty bitty, like 3 or 4 in a white tutu, and they turned off the lights on stage, and you just see like your little tutus, these
that's
little light
so
up tutu.
cute.
It's so cute. I vividly
Light
remember
hugs or something. That's so cute. I
that.
love that. Your favorite way to energize before a workout.
Mm, I am going to be scream singing show tunes in my car.
Love that. Your favorite post go-to post workout snack or meal.
Um, I almost always immediately have a meal following a workout. And my favorite one is like probably gonna be like halal, like a nice like
Mm,
gyro, like a wrap.
yeah. Your favorite dance show?
Oh gosh. These really are rapid fire. Um, Probably anything goes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Favorite performer of all time?
Oh my gosh. Let's say Vera Ellen.
Nice.
Yeah.
Favorite hype song to get you hyped for a performance?
Um, Gosh, I'm really showing what a musical theater nerd I am.
I love it. I love it.
I'm like, oh gosh, I'm really not cool at all. Uh, let's do Positive from Legally Blonde the musical.
Oh, so cute. Okay. Do you have a favorite dance move currently?
Favorite dance move currently? Um, I just started taking pole classes recreationally, so I'll say a little martini set.
Cute. Just a couple more. Your favorite place you've ever visited in your dance career?
Sydney, Australia.
Nice. Favorite dance music video?
Slave for You.
Love that one. Favorite dance movie?
Um, Center Stage.
Good one.
It's a classic.
Yes. And then, what is or when do you feel the most confident?
Hmm, that's a great question. Should have started with this. I am honestly the most confident probably when I'm deadlifting. And that is such a broy answer. And like, I'm like cringing at myself for saying it. But I think it's something that's so awesome to be able to lift heavy weight and move heavy
Yeah.
weight with great form. Um, and know like mentally I'm able to do that and physically I'm able to do that. And that was something that when I was auditioning regularly, that was really important to me. When I felt insecure in an audition, or sometimes that was even my fun fact in audition rooms, they'd be like, tell us a fun fact about yourself. And I'd be like, I can deadlift 225 pounds. And they'd be like, that's weird. Most people say they can go. But it was really important
That's
to me to
really cool
know.
though.
Yeah, and so I'm most confident when I'm training really hard and consistently.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's a great place to end. Thank you so much, Amber, for coming on the Imperfect Cheerleader podcast. I want you to talk about a little bit about Dancers Who Lift and what you have going on so that people can find you and follow everything that you're doing.
Yeah, you can find Dancers Who Lift on all platforms. Do we need to list them all? There's so many. We're on all of them.
I'll put them in the show notes. I got you.
Okay.
I got you.
Yeah, you can find Dancers Who Lift. If you're interested in starting your strength training journey, we have a few different options. We have a membership program where we'll just tell you what to do as soon as you get to the gym every week. It's called Body Mechanics. Or if you want me to be your personal trainer or a member of our team, we hire professional dancers turned personal trainers to be your coach. We can do one-on-one online coaching anywhere in the world. We'll write you a personalized program, personalized nutrition plan. We'll do a lot of that mindset work that I was talking about earlier. And we're also on the DWL blog. So if you have a dance, fitness, nutrition question, the answer is probably on the blog. We've got a couple of really cool things to be announced happening this summer, so I won't spoil it for us yet, but we've got a really exciting, I'll just hint, challenge coming up this summer that I think is going to be really awesome and touch on a lot of what we talked about today.
Awesome. Everyone, go find Amber Tacy on Dancers Who Lift and follow all of the things. And yes, thank you again so much for coming on. So many good takeaways from this episode. I'm sure it's going to help a lot of people. So thank you so much, Amber. Keep doing what you're doing for
Great.
real.
Thanks for having me, Jasmine.
Y'all, Amber was amazing. One of my favorite guests I've had on the show. And I want to give you some takeaways. So, number one, the audition is the job and the reward is performing. Number two, be aware of the surface you are practicing on for safety and for your joints. Number three, do cardio, especially HIIT, which is imperative for pro cheer dancers. Slow down in the gym and tackle the full range of motion with heavier weights. Number four, you are already capable of strength training. Number five, ask yourself, am I putting in the reps to strengthen this muscle that is my brain, just like you are strengthening your body? Number six, are you showing up as a version of who you should be on a team? If not, why? Number seven, make sure you eat enough. The best supplement you can take is from the earth, which includes whole nutrient-dense foods. Number eight, candy can actually be best right before performance. It gives you the boost of energy that you need. And number nine, the same way we can strengthen our muscles, we can strengthen our minds. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I appreciate you for tuning in each week, and just know that during this audition season, give yourself grace. Give yourself a big hug. You are stepping out and doing something that a lot of people are afraid to do. And just because you are taking a chance on yourself, you are courageous because of that. I am taking new clients. I'm taking privates. So if you are interested in working with me, please reach out and we'll have a strategy call. I'm also able to choreograph your dance for you or help you choreograph it and pick the music and everything based off of your audition. So if that's something that you're interested in, we can have a chat about that as well if that's something that you need for your audition. I know sometimes auditions, they want you to come up with your own style and routine to submit it. So if that's you, then feel free to reach out. We can work something out. Also, come to my virtual classes every Tuesday. I do Tuesday classes, and I want you to be a part of those classes if you are wanting to work on your choreography retention, your flexibility. We spend a good amount of time working through just stretches and warm-ups and different techniques that can help you with your turns, your kicks, and your leaps. And you can do it virtually each Tuesday. Well, 3 Tuesdays out the month. So I hope to see you soon, and I hope that you have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye for now.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the ImPerfect Cheerleader podcast. Taking the time to listen while you're busy with all of life's responsibilities means the world to me. If you enjoyed this episode, here are a few ways you can support ICP. Number one, hit the subscribe button so you always get newly released episodes and never miss them. Number two, take a screenshot of the episode you listened to and tag @theprofessionalcheerleader on Instagram. We love to repost your tags and shout you out in our stories. Number three, write a review. This is the best way to show your support for the podcast and helps us bring on even better guests, interviews, and topics. I hope you have a wonderful day, morning, or night, wherever you may be, and are continuing to work towards your goals of becoming a professional cheerleader, dancer, or just someone who loves to move. I'll see you later on another episode of the ImPerfect Cheerleader podcast. Remember, stay frosty, friends. Toodles for now.